For $20,000 a month, I, a poor migrant worker, married my own boss, a 60-year-old Qatari widow who had lost both arms in an accident. I did all this for the money, not out of love. This marriage instilled hope in me to escape my suffering, but at the same time, it threatened my dignity. However, on the wedding night, when the moment I feared most finally arrived, what she asked of me turned my entire world upside down. Dear listeners, before diving into this story, allow me to inquire where you're listening from, as knowing your geography makes our community feel more tangible and close. Thank you, and enjoy the listen. The morning ozone still trembled in the scorching air of Doha when Taras Kovalchuk checked the last ventilation unit in the east wing of the Al Mahmoud family mansion. 4 years in this desert had taught him to rise earlier than the muezzin, at 4:30 in the morning, when the air conditioners worked best. By 7, when the owners began to wake, everything had to function flawlessly, as if by itself, without human intervention. You're Ukrainian? Rashid, the senior technical staff member, a Pakistani with an eternally dissatisfied face, called out to him. The madam complained about noise in the pool yesterday. Check the pumps. Already did. The filter was clogged. I cleaned it. Rashid grunted and shuffled on, his sole scraping the marble floor that Taras had polished to a mirror shine just yesterday. It was always like this. Invisible hands kept this palace in perfect condition, and the owners lived in the illusion that luxury existed on its own, like a law of nature. In the small staff room, where he shared 12 square meters with a Filipino named Marco, it smelled of cheap curry and sweat. On the nightstand lay his phone, the only thread connecting him to home, to human, where apple trees were probably blooming in Grandpa Stepan's garden. If the garden hadn't been seized for debts yet. Did Mom call? Marco asked, pulling on his work uniform. Yesterday. Dad's down again. Sugar spiked. $60,000 hung over the Kovalchuk family like a noose, tightening each month. Father Mikhailo Stepanovich had worked at the firm his whole life until diabetes felled him at 55. Mother Oksana Petrovna held on with her last strength, selling vegetables from the garden at the market. Marco knew better than to ask how much, but curiosity won out. $1,500. Almost everything. Crazy. What do you live on? Taras shrugged, buttoning the last button on his uniform shirt with the embroidered Al Mahmoud family logo, a golden falcon on a grey background. He lived on scraps, on free staff food, on the hope that one day this nightmare would end. Madame Mariam Fard Al Mahmoud entered his life like all owners, silently and majestically. A 60-year-old widow with a tragic fate, she rarely left her apartments on the 3rd floor, but when she descended, the whole house froze in respectful anticipation. 10 years ago, a car accident took her husband and both her arms. Now, prosthetics were hidden under the long sleeves of her traditional abaya, and in her dark eyes lingered an old, unpassing pain. Taras, she called him one morning as he adjusted the temperature in the greenhouse. Come here. He approached, eyes lowered as instructed in the briefing for new workers. Looking owners in the eye was considered insolent. You fixed the air conditioner in the small hall? Yes, madam. The compressor relay was faulty. I replaced it. Now it works. Others said we needed to call specialists from the city. Expensive. I figured it out myself. Back home in Ukraine, I had to fix equipment. You can't run to a master every time. She looked at him for a long time, and Taras felt his ears redden under her gaze. There was no contempt or indifference in that look, rather curiosity, as if she saw something unusual in him. Good, she said finally. You'll be responsible for the technical condition of the East Wing. I'll tell Rashid. From that day, their closeness began. Madame Mariam increasingly turned to him directly, bypassing Rashid, who eyed Taras with poorly hidden envy. She entrusted him with small tasks. Check contractor bills, monitor garden work quality, even select new lamps for the library. Why him? Rashid grumbled in the staff kitchen. I've worked 4 years, and what? Others have slaved for 10 years. Shut up, someone snapped. Not your business. The madam knows what she's doing. One day, Taras bought parts for the irrigation system and, upon returning, handed Madame Mariam the change, pitiful 50 rials that any other worker would have pocketed. Here are the receipts. The change. Madame Mariam raised her eyebrows, examining the small bills as if seeing them for the first time. Taras, are you honest? She asked suddenly. He shrugged, not knowing how to respond to such a direct question. I try. Here in Doha, honesty costs dearly. Very dearly. 3 months passed since that honesty conversation. Tara's got used to his special position, not quite a servant, but not an insider either, a suspended state that evoked envy in some and bewilderment in others. Then came that night. Tara's, come to me. Madame Mariam's voice over the intercom sounded unusually quiet. It was already past midnight. The house was silent, broken only by the hum of air conditioners. Tara's climbed to the 3rd floor. What could have happened at such a late hour? Madame Mariam's office resembled a museum more than anything. Persian carpets, antique darkwood furniture, shelves with books in Arabic and French. It smelled of sandalwood and some spices that made his head spin slightly. The hostess sat by the window, gazing at the lights of nighttime Doha. Sit, she nodded to the chair opposite. We need to talk. Tara sat, feeling everything inside him churn with a bad premonition. I know about your debts, she said without preamble. $60,000. Father's illness. Land in pledge. Tara's went cold. How did she know? Had she checked, or had someone from the staff informed her? Madam, be quiet and listen. I have an unusual proposal. She turned to him, and Tara saw in her eyes firm resolve mixed with something like desperation. I need a husband. Tara's blinked, sure he'd misheard. Not a lover, she continued, noticing his shock. A real husband, before God and the law. A religious marriage for 1 year. Madam, I don't understand. $20,000 a month. She said this figure calmly, as if discussing vegetable prices. To your account in Ukraine. In a year, it'll be $240,000. Tara's couldn't focus his gaze right away. $20,000 a month, that was more than he'd earn in 10 years. Freedom for the family, treatment for his father, a future for his nephews. But why? Only a husband can represent my interests in certain matters. My family. She shook her head. My nephew Nasser is waiting for my death to grab everything. Other relatives are no better. I need someone I can trust. An honest person. But I'm Orthodox, and you. You can't marry a non-Muslim. It's against your laws. You'll convert to Islam. She said it matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious. Formally pronounce the Sharia before a sheikh, and there'll be no obstacles. That's enough for the authorities. What's in your heart, only God knows. Tara swallowed, feeling his throat dry. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a deal. He was selling a year of his life, his name, his faith, perhaps even his soul. And after the year? Divorce. You're free. Debts paid, family safe. That's all. And you won't demand. She smiled wryly. I won't touch you unless you want it yourself. This is a business agreement, Tara's. I'm buying your help, your presence, your signature on documents, not your body. He stood on wobbly legs. I need to think. Of course. Until tomorrow. That night, Tara's didn't sleep. He lay on his narrow bunk, listening to Marco snoring, and ran the numbers through his head. $20,000 a month. Dad would get the best treatment, Mom would stop crying at night, Grandpa's land would be redeemed. Maybe even enough left for a small business, buy a tractor, start his own thing. In return, a year of pretense. A year playing husband to a woman older than his mother. Renouncing his faith, even if formally. He remembered his cousin's wedding in Human. The bride's white dress, happy faces, dancing till dawn. His wedding would be different, a deal, a contract, a lie before God. Before which God now? He didn't know himself. Can't sleep? Marco turned on his bunk. Hot as hell. You're lying. Your face looks like a corpse's. What happened? Nothing. Sleep. At dawn, when the first rays painted Doha's skyscrapers pink, Tara's made his decision. He thought of his mother, how she saw him off at the airport 4 years ago. Son, be careful there. Come back soon. He couldn't return empty-handed. I agree, he told Madame Mariam, entering her office. She nodded, as if she hadn't doubted it. Good. Sheikh Abdullah will come the day after tomorrow. The ceremony was held in 2 stages. First, the Sharia. Tara stood before the old sheikh in a small room flooded with morning light and repeated the words he'd memorized the night before. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The sheikh nodded approvingly. Now Taraz was formally a Muslim, and the path to nikah was open. The nikah itself was conducted quietly, almost secretly. The old sheikh muttered prayers in Arabic. Taraz repeated words whose meaning he still didn't understand. Witnesses, Yusuf, Madame Mariam's personal secretary, and Ibrahim, her old family friend, watched with impassive faces. Now you are my husband, Madame Mariam said when it was over. Welcome to the Al-Mahmoud family. Taraz looked at his hands, the same calluses, the same scars from work. Only now, a gold ring adorned his ring finger. Husband to a Qatari aristocrat. If they knew Inhuman, they'd think he'd gone mad. They moved him to the guest wing. A spacious room with a view of the bay, a private bathroom, even a small balcony. New clothes appeared in the closet as if by magic. Egyptian cotton shirts, Italian tailored pants. Taraz tried them on, feeling like an imposter. What a circus. Rashid caught him in the hallway. Think you're a big shot now? I work like before. Yeah, work. In the old lady's bed. Taraz clenched his fists but stayed silent. A fight would only complicate things. Let them think what they want. In a year, he'd vanish from their lives forever. But what worried him most was Nasser, Madame Mariam's nephew. He appeared at the house almost every day, and each time his gaze grew more hostile. A middle-aged man with a predatory face, he waited, watched, sniffed out any chance to seize his aunt's estate. Auntie, he said one evening at dinner, I heard interesting news. They say you got married. Rumors spread fast. Madame Mariam sipped her tea. And to whom, if I may ask? Nasser glanced at Taraz, sitting at the same table. To this worker. To my husband. His name is Taraz. A Ukrainian? A former Christian? A maintenance technician? Nasser spat the words like curses. You've disgraced Uncle's memory. Enough. Madame Mariam's voice turned icy. This is my house and my life. If you don't like it, the door's there. The nephew stood, knocking over his chair. This isn't over, Auntie. The family won't allow such shame. When he left, slamming the door, Madame Mariam wearily leaned back in her chair. Now you understand why I need a husband. They'll devour me alive if I stay alone. The weeks dragged in an unfamiliar rhythm. By day, Taraz performed his new duties. Accompanying Madame Mariam to meetings, checking documents, even learning to drive a Bentley. In the evenings, he returned to his room and called home. Son, how are you there? His mother's voice sounded both joyful and worried. We got the money. Thank you. Bought medicine for Dad, he's better already. Good, Mom. I got a promotion here, now they pay more. A promotion? You said you were just a technician. Well, now senior technician. Chief. The lie came hard, but the truth would be harder. How to explain to his mother that her son had sold himself for money, changed faith, bore a foreign name, and slept in a house where he was seen as either a servant or a gigolo? At night, Taraz read the Quran, first out of curiosity, then seeking understanding. Since he'd pronounced the Shahada, even formally, it was worth at least learning what he now supposedly believed in. The Arabic lines remained foreign, but in some surahs, he found unexpected solace. About patience, that God doesn't burden a soul beyond what it can bear. But one question tormented him most. Every evening, he escorted Madame Mariam to her bedroom, wished her good night, and returned to his own. And every evening, he paused, expecting her to call him to stay. A contract was a contract, but he was now a husband, even if bought, even if temporary. What if one day she tired of loneliness? What if she decided that since she paid such money, she had a right to more? Taraz imagined the scene hundreds of times. How she'd extend her maimed hands to him, say she needed closeness, warmth, some semblance of love. And what would he do then? Refuse and lose everything? Agree and lose himself? Every rustle in the hallway made him tense. And he continued studying the Quran every night, partly out of curiosity, partly seeking peace of mind. The internal line rang around midnight, pulling Taraz from fruitless attempts to focus on the Arabic script. Madame Mariam's voice sounded tired but with some resolve. Taraz, come to me. We need to talk. Now, Madam? Yes, right now. He hung up. This is it, he thought. For weeks, he'd prepared for this moment, running possible scenarios in his head, and now that it had come, all rehearsals proved useless. Tara straightened his shirt, checked the buttons, and headed down the marble corridor, which had never seemed so long. His bare feet made almost no sound on the cold floor. Loyalty, he repeated to himself. He promised to be a faithful husband, whatever that meant in their union. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Warm light spilled through the crack, and the scent of sandalwood wafted out. Tara's knocked, though he knew he was expected. Enter. Madame Merriam's bedroom wasn't what he'd imagined. Instead of a luxurious bed under a canopy and gold-framed mirrors, restrained elegance reigned. Light walls, minimal furniture, a huge window overlooking nighttime Doha. But most importantly, the hostess sat not in bed but in a velvet chair by the window, fully dressed in a simple ivory tunic. Her hair was covered with a light scarf. On the low table before her lay an old Koran in a worn leather binding. Sit, she nodded to the chair opposite. Tara sank to the edge of the seat, unsure where to put his hands. The silence stretched. Do you know why I chose a religious marriage? She asked finally, not lifting her eyes from the holy book. I could have just hired you, drawn up an employment contract, paid a salary. It would have been simpler. You said only a husband can represent your interests. Yes, I said that. But that's not the whole truth. She raised her head, and Tara saw in her eyes not the authoritative arrogance of a Qatari aristocrat, but something entirely different, weariness and pain accumulated over years. After the accident, I lost not only my arms, Tara's. I lost Amir. My family, my own family, started seeing me only as a broken thing that still brings money. Do you understand? To them, I'm not Mariam, not a woman with a soul and heart. I'm an investment portfolio with prosthetics. Madam, let me finish. Nasser came yesterday again. Threatened to sue in religious court, contest our marriage. Says I've disgraced the family by linking with a former Christian, a servant. Says you deceived me, that you're here only for the money. Tara's clenched his fists. Nasser was right. He had agreed for the money. But now everything had become more complicated. And you want to test me? Madame Mariam shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. I want to test your loyalty, but not to the money you receive, to the dignity you promise to preserve. She took the Koran from the table and extended it to him. Her maimed hands barely held the heavy tome. This is my gift to you on our first wedding night, Tara's. I don't want your body. I want to hear your voice. My voice. Read me Surah Ar-Rum, the 30th. I want to hear how my husband, whom I consider an honest and pious man, reads the word of God. I need peace, Tara's. Peace of mind. I need to be sure I didn't make a mistake choosing you, that for you, faith and honesty aren't empty words. Tara's took the Koran with trembling hands. All his fears, all the scenarios he'd run through for weeks, crumbled to dust. He'd prepared for anything but this. My Arabic is very poor. I know. But you've been studying the Koran these weeks, I've seen it. Just read. Not for me, for both of us. He opened the book, found the surah. The Arabic letters danced before his eyes, but over a week of night vigils, he'd learned to distinguish them. Alif Lam Mim, he began, his voice breaking from excitement. The Romans have been defeated in the nearest land. His Ukrainian accent made the sacred words almost unrecognizable, but he continued, gradually finding rhythm. And in that is a sign for those who reflect. And he reached the verse that took his breath away. And among his signs is that he created for you mates from among yourselves, that you may find tranquility in them, and he placed between you affection and mercy. Indeed, in that are signs for a people who give thought. Madame Mariam closed her eyes, and tension began to leave her face, wrinkles smoothed as if years retreated, if only for a moment. When he finished reading, silence fell in the room, not heavy, but serene. Thank you, she whispered, opening her eyes. I wasn't wrong about you, Tara's. Your dignity is your true wealth. He felt tears welling up and turned away. But these weren't tears of shame or fear. For the first time in 4 years in Qatar, someone saw him as a person, not a function. Go rest, she said softly. We have much work ahead. The next morning, the world had changed. Madame Mariam called him not to check the air conditioning systems but for a conversation that overturned his entire perception of what was happening. In the office flooded with morning light, she showed him photos of an unremarkable building on the outskirts of Doha, a one-story structure lost among warehouses and workshops. "This is the Al-Aman Fund," she said simply. "My secret. And now yours. What is this place?" "A shelter for people like you, migrants who aren't paid wages, whose passports are taken, who are beaten by employers. We help them return home or find justice here." Taras looked at the photos. Simple rooms, a shared kitchen, a small medical point. Nothing luxurious, but clean, safe. But why a secret? Madame Mariam's face darkened. "My mother was Iranian. My husband's family treated her like a servant, though formally she was their relative. She died never feeling at home in this country. I swore I'd help those going through the same now. And Nasser. If Nasser finds out I'm spending family money on foreign workers, he'll get me declared incompetent, block all accounts, and take control. The fund will close, and dozens of people will be left without help." Now Taras understood. 20,000 a month wasn't payment for pretense. It was the fund's budget, funneled through him. "Your salary," Madame Mariam continued, "is the only channel I can control without family approval. Spousal support is my legal right. Once the money hits your account in Ukraine, it's yours. Then you transfer it to the fund. That's it. You become not just my husband, Taras, you become the guardian of Al-Aman, someone who knows the pain of migrants from the inside." The following months flew by in a rhythm of double life. By day, Taras played the role of a young husband to a wealthy widow. Wore expensive clothes, accompanied Madame Mariam to official meetings, posed for photographers at charity events. Nasser watched his every step, seeking a scandal pretext. "Look how our Ukrainian prince has settled in," he hissed at another family dinner. Probably already planning how to divide the inheritance. "Nasser, stop." Madame Mariam set down her fork with a metallic clink. "I'm just looking out for you, Auntie. This man clearly has plans. The only one here making plans for my inheritance is you, nephew." By night, Taras became someone else. He shed the expensive suit, donned simple clothes, and headed to Al-Aman by metro or on an old Toyota bought with his savings. At the fund, they knew him simply as Taras, not Sir, not Madame Al-Mahmoud's husband, but a fellow migrant who'd been a bit luckier. "Brother, thank you. Jat from Pakistan thank him, receiving a ticket home after 2 years of slave labor. Allah will reward you for your kindness." "It's not my kindness," Taras replied. "Just helping as I can." He learned to work with lawyers, file documents, negotiate with consulates. Most of the money went quickly. First to pay off the family debt, then to the fund, rent, legal services, tickets, medical aid. The first months, he kept almost nothing for himself, all went home to clear debts. "Son, you're getting rich there," his mother laughed on the phone. "Sending so much money." "Just working, Mom." "All good." "And when are you coming home?" Dad asks. "Soon, Mom. Once I finish the contract." But as the contract neared its end, leaving Doha became harder. In half a year, over 100 people passed through Al-Aman. Some returned home, some found new jobs, some won court cases against employers. Behind each story stood Taras, the former maintenance technician turned invisible protector for the desperate. The thunder struck 6 months after the wedding. Taras tried to pay the next rent bill for the fund when the ATM refused. Then another, and another. "Madam." He burst into the office without knocking. "The accounts are blocked." Mariam looked up from her papers, and by her face, Taras knew she'd expected this. "Nasser." Nasser sued. "Documents declaring me incompetent. Claimed I'm squandering the family fortune by paying insane sums to a foreign husband. The court temporarily froze all my assets pending investigation. But what about the fund? We have obligations, people are counting on us." "I know." She stood and approached the window. Against the backdrop of Doha's shining skyscrapers, her figure seemed especially fragile. "Our contract was for a year, Taras. More than half has passed. Your debt in Ukraine is paid. You have savings. No one would judge if you decide to leave. Madam, Mariam. Just Mariam. And you've earned the right to call me by name." She turned to him. "Think, Taras. You're free. You can return to your human, a rich man. Buy land, help your sister, provide for your parents. Start an honest life. No one will ever know about the fund, about our marriage. To everyone, you're just a lucky migrant who got fortunate. Tara's was silent, gazing into her dark eyes. He really was free, could board a plane and be home in hours, where it smelled of black soil and blooming apples. But he thought of Bomjada, probably hugging his children in Karachi, now of Miguel from the Philippines, who won his case against his employer, of dozens whose cases weren't closed yet, who still awaited help. Without money, the fund would last a few weeks. Then, when I agreed to this marriage, he spoke slowly, choosing words, I promised to be a reliable husband, helper, protector. That promise isn't just for days when money flows like a river. He stepped toward her, bridging the distance he'd maintained all these months. My loyalty isn't bought for 20,000, Mariam. You bought my labor, my time, maybe. But loyalty. You earned it that night when you asked me to read Surah Ar-Rum. When you treated me not as a thing to buy, but as a person with a soul. The Al-Aman Fund is now part of me. I won't abandon it. I won't abandon you. Mariam looked at him long in the officer's silence, where the quiet hum of the air conditioner and distant car noise outside became audible. Then she slowly sank into the chair. Do you understand what you're saying? Her voice was quiet. You have a family in Ukraine. Grandpa's land. A future. I understand. No, you don't. She raised her gaze. You think this is nobility, but I see a boy from a Ukrainian village about to sacrifice everything. For what? For an old woman with maimed hands? Taras shoved his hands in his pockets, a gesture from when he was a simple technician. I've saved something, he said finally. Set aside almost all my salary the last half year. Thought for a house in Human, maybe start a small business. $30,000. Mariam sharply raised her head. Taras, no. That's your money. Your future. Enough for 3 months of fund operations. Maybe 4 if we economize. He spoke quickly, as if afraid she'd interrupt. Rent, legal services, tickets for those wanting to go home. I've calculated it all. You're mad. Possibly. Taras smiled wryly. But you said yourself. Honesty costs dearly in Doha. Here's my price. Mariam turned to the window, but he caught her shoulders trembling. When she spoke again, her voice was muffled. In this world, everything is bought and sold. Loyalty, respect, even love have a price. I thought I knew that better than others. And you? She shook her head. You're destroying everything I believed in. Mariam, go. I need to think. The next morning, Nasser burst into the house, shouting from the threshold. Taras heard his voice in the kitchen, shrill and full of fury. Where is this Ukrainian thief? Where is he hiding? Taras descended to the living room, where Nasser paced between sofas, waving papers. Mariam sat in her chair by the window, completely calm. There you are. Nasser jabbed a finger at him, with a massive gold ring. Thought I wouldn't find out? You're bleeding my aunt dry, hiding her money. Those are my money, Taras replied calmly. My salary for half a year. I can show all documents. Salary. The nephew turned to Mariam. Auntie, don't you see? He's using you. First wormed his way in, then married, now draining money. Enough. Mariam's voice was quiet but firm. Taras has the right to dispose of his means as he wishes. I know where those funds are going, to runaway servants, to illegals, to those breaking Qatar's laws. I'm helping people regain their dignity, Taras replied, looking Nasser straight in the eye. A word probably unfamiliar to you. Nasser swung, but Taras dodged, then grabbed his wrist. Don't, he said quietly. You don't want to do this. Let go, you dirty migrant. Enough. Mariam stood, leaning on the armrests. Nasser, get out of my house immediately. This isn't over, the nephew hissed, yanking his hand free. I'll prove in court you're incompetent, that this con man is manipulating you. When the door slammed behind him, silence fell in the house. Mariam slowly sank back into the chair. Sorry, Taras said. I shouldn't have. You defended your honor. And mine. She raised her eyes to him. Nasser won't stop. I know. So we need to act fast. I've decided, Taras. We are selling the house. What? But it's the family nest, a status symbol. She smiled wryly. It's a golden cage. I've lived in it over 30 years and only now realize how hateful it is to me. The next week, the Al Mahmood mansion turned into an anthill of activity. Movers covered antique furniture, appraisers compiled inventories with important heirs, potential buyers wandered the rooms, appraisingly eyeing the marble columns. Tara's watched this bustle with an unusual feeling, as if dismantling the very palace that once seemed the embodiment of an unattainable dream. Crystal chandeliers were carefully lowered from ceilings. Wrapped in bubble-wrap Persian carpets rolled into tight bundles, paintings in gilded frames vanished into wooden crates. "Don't you regret it?" he asked one evening as they sat on the terrace amid boxes. "About what?" "Things." Mariam shook her head. "You know, after the accident, when I woke in the hospital and saw what was left of my arms, my first thought wasn't pain. I thought I'd never touch my husband's face again. And he was already dead. Things. What are things?" The new house was modest, a 2-story building in a quiet outskirts district where petty clerks and pensioners lived. No fountains, no Italian marble, just white walls, tiled floors, and a small courtyard with a lone date palm. "Welcome home," Mariam said, crossing the threshold. "The neighbors will be shocked," Tara's noted, carrying in boxes. "Let them. I'm tired of living by others' expectations." Nasser appeared 3 days later. His face twisted in disgust at the sight of the modest house. "Auntie, you've lost your mind," he declared from the doorway. "Selling the family heritage and settling in this kennel." "This is my home," Mariam replied calmly. "And you're a guest here. An uninvited one. I've come for the last time to try to reason with you. The family is furious. You've disgraced Uncle's memory by linking with this." He glanced at Tara's with contempt. "With this adventurer. But it's not too late. Divorce, return at least part of the money, and we'll forget this shame." "No. Then blame yourself. The court will declare you incompetent, and I'll become your guardian. This is for your own good." After he left, Mariam was silent for a long time, gazing out the window at the dusty street. "He'll win, you know," she said finally. "He has connections, money for the best lawyers, family support. And we have the truth." "Truth?" She smiled wryly. "In Qatari courts, truth costs less than a good lawyer." In the morning, Tara's found her at an unusual task. Sorting documents into 2 neat stacks. "What is this?" "Preparation." She looked up, and Tara's was struck by how she'd aged in these weeks of struggle. "If Nasser succeeds, we need to protect the fund in time." "But how?" She looked at him long, as if weighing something. "There's a way. But it requires your help. And your consent." "For what?" "For our marriage to become real. Officially. Not just nikah, but a full marriage recognized by Qatari authorities." Tara's felt his legs buckle. "But we agreed. Contract. 1 year. The contract ends in 2 months. And Nasser is acting now. If you become my official husband, he can't claim guardianship. And most importantly, I can transfer fund management to you through a will." "Mariam, I can't decide that right away." "I'm not asking you to love me," she interrupted. "I'm asking you to protect what we both believe in. Think until tomorrow." That night, Tara sat in the courtyard under the stars, the same stars that shone over Human, only here veiled in desert dust haze. He thought of his mother awaiting his return, of Grandpa's land he could redeem. Then he recalled the faces at the fund, dozens of stories of pain and hope. In the morning, he found her in the living room. "You've decided to leave," she said without opening her eyes. "No. I'm staying. I agree to everything." She opened her eyes. "You understand what this means? This is no longer a game, Tara's." "I understand. But was what we are doing ever a game?" The official ceremony passed quietly. Sheikh Abdullah seemed surprised but asked no extra questions. When it was over, Mariam handed Tara's an envelope. "Here's the will. Everything goes to the Al-Aman Fund. You become the sole executor. Why talk like that? You'll live long yet. Doctors give me a few months. Maybe a year. My heart is tired of fighting, Tara's." A week later, the first attack happened. Tara's found her unconscious in the living room. In the hospital, she came to, pale and exhausted. "Promise me," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "whatever happens, the fund will live." I promise. Nasser appeared once more, now with a lawyer and relatives. The whole company piled into the small living room. Auntie, Nasser began in a saccharine voice, we've come with good intentions. Sign the statement declaring the marriage invalid. Mariam took the documents, leafed through, and neatly tore them in half. The nephew turned purple. You've lost your mind. On the contrary, I've found it. There are things more important than money, dignity, honor, faith. But you wouldn't understand. When the uninvited guests left, Mariam asked in a weak voice, bring the Quran. Read Surah Ar-Rum. The last night came a month later. Tara sat by her bed, holding her maimed hand, reading the familiar lines about Allah's signs. At dawn, as the first at hand floated over Doha, Mariam smiled so peacefully as he'd never seen and closed her eyes forever. At the modest funeral, Nasser stood aside with an impassive face. After the ceremony, he approached Tara's. Think you've won? He hissed. I'll contest the will. Prove manipulation. I could leave now, return to Ukraine. But I gave a promise. And unlike you, I keep my word. Let's see how you sing without money for lawyers. I've been without money before. Survived. And you've spent your life fearing to lose what isn't yours. Years passed their course. Tara's didn't become rich, didn't build a house in Human. He lived in that same small house, drawing a modest director's salary from a fund. Every rial of the inheritance went to help the needy. The Al-Aman Fund grew, becoming known far beyond Qatar. Filipino maids, Indian builders, Pakistani drivers came here, all those the system tossed to the roadside. Sometimes he visited Ukraine. His mother met him with tears, father clapped his shoulder, Sister Olesia showed photos of nephews. Son, when are you coming home for good? His mother asked. I have important work there, Mom. He couldn't explain that a promise to a dying woman had become the meaning of his life. Every night before bed, Tara's opened the old Quran gifted by Mariam on that first wedding night, reread the surah about God's signs in creating pairs, about love and mercy between them. Tara's often thought their story was one such sign. Two people united not by desire or blood, but by dignity and faith, a Ukrainian peasant and a Qatari aristocrat. He finished reading, closed the book, and smiled to himself.